that the elaborate system that Google had concocted in concert with publishers to create the world's biggest online digital bookstore, which frankly would only compete with the Strand. This is the only institution that would come close to that sort of scale, could not go forward as designed in the settlement. And the judge tossed it out for some fairly technical legal reasons. It was all about civil procedure, but the case itself, the conflict in the case itself, was about copyright. And those copyright issues were never settled in court. Those things were never answered in court. The settlement itself was a way of dodging those issues to create this massive online bookstore. And to me, what was really sleazy about the whole endeavor was that the leaders of Google, especially Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders, consistently said that what they were doing was creating an online library, when in fact they were creating an online bookstore. Now, I happen to think that there's something deeply noble about running a bookstore and selling books. I try to sell books, right? Nothing wrong with just saying, we're doing a great bookstore for everybody. Instead, Google tried to position its activity as something explicitly in the public interest, when in fact it was explicitly in Google's interest. And we're very lucky. For most of the last 12 years, almost everything that's been in Google's interest has coincided with our interest, which is why we've had very few reasons to complain, and there have been very few moments when Google has actually had to say it was sorry. You know, basically what I just mentioned, these three and 2 or 3 others in previous years. That's a pretty good run for a company, right? BP should be so lucky, right? Ford should be so lucky. Toyota should be so lucky. Google's doing a pretty good job with all of this. Nonetheless, the level of importance in our lives, the fact that it plays such a deep role in how we make decisions, in how we decide to vote, the recipes we decide to use at home, the maladies that we diagnose ourselves with or misdiagnose ourselves with, are all mediated by Google. Not determined or dictated, but certainly influenced by Google's algorithms. And those values that Google's programmers bake into those algorithms are invisible to us unless we start picking at it and reading about it and challenging Google, which is really what I hope to do with this book. I hope that when you get done with this book, you have a sense of what really matters to Google, what matters to the people who work at Google in terms of the values that they try to have their algorithms express. And I'd like you to get a sense of both its limitations and its great power and potential. Because I think we can live better with Google. I would love to see us use Google in a wiser way. I would love to see us use Google in a way that both recognizes its power and brilliance and recognizes the extent to which it can cross over and actually do some harm. And I don't think we've had that level of clarity yet. I'm confident that we're getting there. We're getting there because of recent news events, some regulatory interventions. We're also getting there, I think, because we're about 20 years into the culture of the World Wide Web. And so we are actually getting to the point now where we can ask healthy, mature, complex questions about how we want to live through and with this medium. We don't have to revert to simplicities the way we did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? We don't have to revert to moral panics and say, but what about the children, right? We don't have to revert to panics about copyright. We don't have to revert to panics about privacy. We can actually ask questions about what's really happening. We have evidence now. We have experience. This is not an alien system to us anymore. It's something we've been dealing with in a pretty central way for 20 years. And I think it's time that we have a sober discussion about the companies and the technologies that are affecting our lives so quickly. We tend to be so thrilled by the new that we rush toward it without asking the hard questions. And as Elvis said, fools rush in. So with that, I'd love to have a Q&A conversation with you now and get your sense of what matters in the Google world. Yes, sir. Ah, very good.
Not only that,
Okay. Ah, okay. So, the gentleman's challenging the notion, the rather shallow thing I said, that Google is constantly improving. And I guess it really depends on who's judging the improvement, right? And this gentleman is pointing out that he stepped away from the internet for how long? Almost 2 years. Well, congratulations. That's lovely. Did food taste better? The air was sweeter. I mean, oh, yeah, I envy you. Unfortunately, my day job requires, right? As you know, at least that's an excuse. So in that time, the gentleman found out that Google wasn't actually working in a significantly better way for him than it had 2 years ago, and in some ways, it actually was harder to use because there were certain defaults one could not turn off, like the pop-up boxes, for instance, right? So let me go into a couple things here. First of all, from Google's point of view, it had improved, even though if you didn't notice it, to your own self-satisfaction, Google had improved the ways that it measures us, and depending on the search you did, it was better able at that period of time, and certainly in the last year and a half, better able to target its search results to what it knows about you. And one of the reasons it probably seemed to be very similar in terms of the quality and nature of the search results to you is that you hadn't been feeding Google. You hadn't been a worker bee. So Google didn't know enough about you, right? For those of us who were actually interacting with Google over those 2 years, Google had a really rich record of what we were doing, not only as individuals, because that information gets mostly anonymized after about 18 months, but collectively, Google keeps very good track of us by, for instance, the general IP number that our computers are part of. So if you're part of a network at work and Google knows your location by your IP number, Google's able to judge what you might be interested in many ways based on other people around you as well and the things they've clicked on, right? So Google has all of this data for 12 years, all this data that's been collecting from almost all of us except you, and so Google didn't have anything to go on when you returned to it. Okay, this is the essence of the question. Why is that an improvement? It's better for shopping, right? And Google is increasingly engineering itself to be better for shopping, and my problem with that, and I hope you share my concern, is that shopping is not learning, and sometimes what's better for shopping is actually worse for learning. And as you know, before Google was able to customize results and localize results to this level, we could do the same search in different parts of the country and get similar results because Google didn't localize that much, right? Now, that's horrible for shopping, right? If you're sitting here in Manhattan and I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we're both doing searches for shoes, right? And you and I want different kinds of shoes, different styles of shoes, but we're getting the same results, and we're all getting these national chains. We're not getting our local stores. That's not really the best possible shopping results. Google now gives us a great set of shopping choices, like some local stores, some local specials, also big national ones, finds the best price. Over time, Google knows certain aspects of shoes. If you happen to be a horse enthusiast and it knows that about you, you might actually get horseshoe ads right up front. An example I often use is if you have told Google over time that you are an enthusiast about wildlife in South America and your friend is an enthusiast about British cars and you both search for Jaguar, you're going to get results that reflect the various interests, right? Your friend is not going to get car results and you're not going to get jungle cat results. Now, that's sort of flippant, but that's the sort of thing that Google is building into the system. Again, great for shopping, not so great for learning, because I happen to think that we were better off when the menu of information we're presented isn't a reflection of what we tend to go toward left to our own devices, right? So there are 4 or 5 blogs I read regularly. They reinforce and reflect my political orientation, and they serve me well. Google doesn't need to serve those up to me. I know how to find them. But if I do a search for so I'm trying to figure out something about a political issue, Google knows where I go and knows what I click on and is likely to feed back to me sources that are very similar or appeal to the same readers as the readers of these blogs that I read. Now, that's not necessarily healthy, right? That's, at least it's not challenging, which I think is better in a democratic republic. I would like to come across, maybe I wouldn't like personally, but I would like us all, this is my teacher voice, right? What's good for us is if we come across a variety of sources that challenge our preconceived notions, that take us in new directions, that we can get angry about or annoyed about. I think the gentleman in the back had his hand up. Yes, hi.
Yeah, sounds like me. I almost feel like a victim by the way you're talking about. I don't have, like, I believe those that enter into Google, maybe they lazy, maybe they just don't want to investigate or go, you know, they just lazy. They just say, oh, I can say, but
right.
and instead of going to take the time to really develop, go through the process of finding
Yeah, yeah.
so, in some ways, it's just for lazy people. And that's what I'm lazy people that y'all victims for being lazy or not being so energetic about. Because to me, it sounds like Kellogg Farm.
Yeah.
They have a monopoly over what to eat. Nobody really says anything about that. You know, people do other cereals, either
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure, sure, sure. No, you know, so what you pointed out is exactly what my wife warned me about when I did the first draft of this book. She read it. She said, "You know, you're telling us all that we're lazy and that we're not critical enough." And that was a risk I took. And it's you know, again, you know, teacher voice. So in a sense, me too, right? And I think this is the thing is that Google takes advantage of our desire for speed, our desire for convenience. And it does so in a way that constantly rewards us for playing its game. Now, in a sense, yes, I'm saying we Americans have a bit of a laziness issue. Maybe Western Europeans do as well. You know, and it's a tough thing to try to get out there without sounding preachy. So I'm, you know, what I'd like to say about that is, you know, we're susceptible because life is so complicated, life is so fast, and because the gadgets and gizmos and technologies we're granted are so enticing, right? That all of a sudden I'm playing Angry Birds 3 hours a night, right? There's nothing lazier than that. Last week, instead of going to play golf, I played Tiger Woods golf, all right, on my iPad, right? That's lazy, right? So I am the laziest of the lazy. That's my only defense in this situation. Yes, ma'am. Oh, good. Okay, so what is a better search engine for searching? There isn't one. That's the sad thing, right? There's no single search engine that does general searching as well as Google, as far as I can tell. There are other major search engines that do certain things well and other things not so well. Bing is the biggest competitor to Google right now, and it is explicitly about commerce. It is explicitly about making sure you can buy the right plane ticket, the right shoes, go to the right restaurant. Yes, sir.
You can refine your search however you want. I
Mm-hmm.
think your criticism of Google is off base.
Okay.
You can refine it however you want.
Okay.
And the more options they give you, the better off you are. So I don't understand the criticism of Google at all.
Oh, my criticism is actually not so much of Google. Google is doing exactly what's good for Google. And Google is
It seems to me they're doing what's good for us too.
most of the time, yes. The real issue is whether we are comfortable with having an opaque system play such an important role in our lives, right? And if you're comfortable with that, fine. I'm not. And I really think it's worth trying to pull back the layers of opacity so we better understand it. And if we're happy with it, as frankly I am, I use Google all the time.